back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by somebody that has been very influential in my life through the films that he's been a part of, the amazing Michael Kopelow. How you doing today, brother?
I'm cool, man.
It's so awesome that we're able to do this. Like I said, you've been a huge part of my life. Growing up, man, some of the films that you've been a part of that have really influenced me. You got Point Break, The People Under the Stairs, The Stoned Age, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And I could not be more excited for the new film, Phone Book. I know that that's in post-production right now, but is there anything you can tell us about that won't get your ass in the jackpot?
No, not at all. That it was shot a while ago, before all the COVID and lockdown and all that. It was really interesting. It's kind of like a day in the life of this dude who I play, and he basically is kind of he's a slob, and he's really not kind of going anywhere with himself, lazy, and he has just been like out of work and home for like the longest time, and it's gotten to the point where his electricity is pretty much getting turned off and all that. So he's, I don't know, just futzing around, and he finds an old phone book, because like, who uses a phone book anymore?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so he finds this phone book, and he just starts going down the line of like, he's bored. He's like, I'm just going to call these people. And what happens is he starts like, the people's phone numbers have changed, and they're not the real people. And he thinks he's talking to somebody that he's not really talking to. And it just ends up causing all this chaos in everyone's life. And
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to play.
And for those of you that don't know, a phone book used to come in the mail once a year, and it would have an alphabetical order, everybody's phone numbers in the county or town that you lived in. So you knew how to get a hold of certain businesses or certain people. Say they left their wallet on the Walmart counter. You could look in the phone book and find their address and their phone number. But in the society we live in now, you got Google and you got creeps. So really no reason for a phone book anymore. You might have Michael calling you in the middle of the night because he needed a random number.
It could. I could, Google a number and just random, just use, just experiment, see what happens.
Well, do we have a release date for that yet, or?
I have no idea. I kind of lost contact with what's happening. The last time I checked, I think they were still, still in post. I think. I'm sure they were going to release it, and then something happened, so they had to go back and fix some things, I guess. So,
well, if you get any updates, please let me know so I can update everybody about the film, because I'm very interested in it. But everybody out there, you don't have to wait for me, because down here in the description, I have all of Michael's social media links. So all you gotta do is click down here, follow him on social media, and you will be updated as soon as he is updated. One movie you were a part of that I would like to talk about a little bit here, because in the annals, I prefer annals of horror, history, this is one of the most underlooked movies of all time, in my opinion, and that is The People Under the Stairs. You were one of the guys in the basement, and that movie to me is such, even back then, was so powerful, not just because of how scary it was, but because of the message that it portrayed about society. What was it like for you to film that movie? To be a part of that?
It was horrifying. It was it was unlike any film experience I've ever had. I went out for it for the part of Roach, I guess the guy who's kind of saving the day in a way. And Wes Craven said, I just look too healthy. I couldn't play the part, but he did. He was like, that's how it all started. I remember going to the audition, and the audition was just strange. I was like crawling all over the floor, doing all kinds of weird stuff. And but yeah, initially got cast as like one of the people under the stairs, and it was crazy. It was my first time getting full makeup like that.
Yeah,
and that was nuts. I went down to, I think it was K&B Studios, and I had to get a full cast in my head. So when I say like terrifying, they stuck. I was like, wait a minute, you can't be claustrophobic. So they stick straws in your nose, and they do a whole thing of your head. And I had to like stay in that, for like, I don't know, it was like 15, 20 minutes or so, just breathing out of a straw. And I'm like, the thoughts going through my head at that, I was like, they could so fuck with me right now.
Right. What are you going to do in that moment?
Right. And maybe think this would be like it's a horror film in itself. Like, what if people, I started writing a different horror film. Well, this is how people die. But,
and it's funny because, I've mentioned some of the movies you've been a part of. You are not a genre actor. Point
No.
Break, you got fucking balls to the wall action there. The People Under the Stairs, which is terrifying horror film. Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter Said, and Stoned Age, obviously comedies. What is your preference of film to make if you had to choose your preference?
I guess if I have never done it, and I've never been part of a film like this, but I like the fantasy genre the most, as far as whether it's like kind of like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, that Willow, like all those kind of the sort of whatever you want to call it, Game of Thrones. So where there's some sort of fantasy, magical kind of past, a past that never existed or a past that existed, who knows?
Sure.
Yeah, and those are the kind of films like that influenced me growing up, that I just loved watching and got really into. And I've never been in one of those, but if I was to pick a genre that I would like to, continue with, I think that would be it.
I can imagine you rocking Bowie and Labyrinth, man.
That'd be great. I'd have to lose some weight.
You're too healthy to play Bowie.
Yeah, I'd have to learn how to sing and lose weight and be a stretch. So
right. Well,
and die with my eyes.
Yeah, we talked about the future, what's coming up with Phone Book, and we know what you're doing right now, man. But I really want to go back to the past, and I want to talk about the first horror movie you watched and got you started in the horror genre. And your first horror movie was
American Werewolf in London. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't imagine. Do you remember how old you were the first time you seen it?
Man, I don't remember. I saw it in the theater with my.
Oh, that's
my
so
dad.
Awesome.
Yeah, with my dad. Made a bad choice. He took my younger brother, and he was like a kid, like 3 or something like that, or 4. And before, like, a parent could take any
Yeah.
And he was like nightmares for the rest of his life. He was traumatized, but I thought I was bitching. I was like, this is amazing. I was a teenager maybe when I saw it.
Right, and we were talking before we started. This is in my top 5 favorite horror movies of all time because it has a little bit of everything to it. It's got action, it's got love, it's got horror, it's got some comedy bits to it. Now, you said you were a teenager, but do you remember which scene it was from American Werewolf that affected you the most?
Yeah, it was when he transforms, the stretching, when he just comes into when he first full moon, and he's like, and just the comedy of it, but also the sheer terror of it, and just incredibly performed too. And him just I never seen anything like that. Just the whole him transforming into this wolf, and the face and the stretching and the sounds, the dull, the cracking of his bones. And
to this day, I don't think there's ever been a werewolf transformation that's been done practically or even with CGI that can match up to that American Werewolf transformation. Like with his hand stretching out and him laying on the ground. It's fucking amazing. Such a great scene, man.
Yeah, him looking at his hand and being like, "What the fuck is happening to me?" Which was way cool.
Yeah. And like I said, to this day, you watch this. I say this on almost every podcast episode, but when it comes to practical effects in horror movies, my top 3 are A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, American Werewolf in London, and John Carpenter's The Thing. I think when it comes to practical effects, you don't get any better than those 3 movies, especially with Nightmare on Elm Street, the budget that they had. American Werewolf, they didn't have a huge budget on that either. And then John Carpenter's The Thing, they didn't have the CGI, but they did it with practical effects and made it so fucking amazing. Because I don't hate CGI like a lot of people. I think if CGI is used properly, it can work very well.
Oh, yeah.
But I would rather see the practical effects. And I think that's growing up, watching Jaws, Nightmare, The Thing, Halloween, American Werewolf. Those are the things that really turned me on to practical effects. Creepshow is another huge one that really got me into the practical effects side of things. So we talked about which scene affected you the most, but when somebody comes up to you and they start talking about American Werewolf in London, it gets just brought up in conversation. Michael, what would you say the first thing that pops in your head is?
Is that scene where he gets bit when the werewolf attacks, and just how well that was shot, and the suspense. And here was David Naughton who was in it, who was like a kind of a pop star.
Yeah.
in a way, and just being like, wow, I thought he was fantastic, and completely believable, and a complete, so that was, I was inspired by that. It's like, oh, he's a singer or whatever, but also he's a good actor. And just, I don't know, just the way that whole episode in their walk in the when he finally gets bit.
Yeah, because stay away from the Moors,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what people forget now, because this movie has become so influential to us, is they caught a lot of shit at first. Everybody was worried about it because John Landis, was doing Animal House and shit. And then he
Yeah.
comes out like, hey, I'm going to take David Naughton and make a horror werewolf movie. And people are like, what the fuck are you doing? There's no way this is going to work. And he fucking nailed it with this movie, man.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. No, that and just also just the kind of like the buddy system, or their buddies and their friends, and just how he keeps revisiting him.
Yeah.
just the awkward, like, dark comedy of the whole thing was.
And I love how every time he visits him, he's decomposed a little bit more.
Yeah, that was it, just because you still cared about him, but he's grotesque.
When he first sees him, and he's like, "Are you going to eat your food, David?" He just takes it. It's so fucking great, man. Like, that's brilliant. Like I said, a lot of the comedy in this doesn't feel forced. Like, it feels genuinely funny and like I said, dude did Animal House. You got John Landis, so the comedy is going to land, but he didn't overdo the comedy. He did it to where it was in there. It wasn't overdone. So when a comedy bit happened, it was memorable because of how funny it was.
Oh yeah, and it's also that, like, what I think most true comedy comes from is just the situation is funny, and just and then
situational humor, man.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable, but also just like, it's the situation is like your dead friends coming back to talk to you. It's okay, all right. The circumstances in which how he died is like, okay, now here we go.
Right.
That's all.
God, I love this movie so much, man. I could talk about it all day. Now I want to do a little bit of a twist here. We talked about which scene affected you the most as a child, but Michael, now as an adult, what would you say your favorite scene from American Werewolf is?
Probably the first time his friend comes back to visit him
in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be it.
Because that scene has everything. You're laughing at that moment. You're scared because of the way David reacts. You're heartbroken because and Jack's telling him, I'm your best friend. I love you, but David, you have to kill yourself or you're gonna hurt somebody. Like, it's so tragic. Like, he loves him so fucking much, but he has to tell him, you have to kill yourself, David. You have to do this. Like, it's so heartbreaking, man.
It's just what I don't know, just the power of that scene in having to. I could imagine having to do that scene,
right?
And where that would take you as an actor. I know how it affected me watching it, but like the challenge, and they met it. I was just like, it becomes a drama then with all these funny. And it's you're right. It's like, it is terrifying, but at the same time, you're just kind of like drawn into it. And to me, that's where the movie gets its like wings in a way. Yeah. Where, like, this is way more than just your typical, okay, you're a werewolf and you're gonna kill people, and maybe you'll fall in love, and it's gonna be frustrating, and you're gonna end up, you're gonna have to tell her, you're gonna have to run away, or whatever it is, and then sequel. But it's like, it didn't have that. It just completely broke the norm for werewolf films, and he just happened to be a werewolf.
Another thing I love about this movie, in my opinion, this has the second darkest ending of any horror film ever, only beaten out by The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist. I think that's the darkest, but you're rooting for him the whole time. You're rooting for David. He's a good guy. He loves Alex, which is the best love story ever, David and Alex. But when he just gets shot and he's killed at the end, and that's just it. Cut to the cheeriest post, the credit scene and the cheer. The score on this movie is unbelievable too. But to have that dark ending, man, is so par for the course for this movie.
Well, I mean, there's a time period too of where like filmmakers were like, that's the story, man. That's it. That's how it has to end. That's what you're gonna get. Not everything is a happy ending.
Werewolves don't always get to run off into the sunset with butterflies and rainbows.
Exactly. Or they do something miraculous where it's just, okay, oh, now I like the werewolf that's already killed all these people, but he's destroyed all the town and ate a bunch of babies, and now he's, but he's a good guy though.
And, yeah. If you look past his flaws,
Yeah, he fought Dracula, so it works. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, it's you're like, oh, well, there it is. It's a complete story.
Mm-hmm. So now is the darkest part of our conversation, and this is the reason I brought up the end, because really there's not too many grotesque deaths in this movie, but as horror fans, we always look for the deaths and the kills. What would you say your favorite or most memorable kill from American Werewolf is?
His first one.
In the subway?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. When he's on the escalator and you just got that POV shot of him coming in on him. Oh my God, it's terrifying, man.
Yeah, because it's his first kill.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it's also it's just the movie's just so incredibly well shot.
Yeah.
It was like for that genre in a sense, not the horror genre, but for this kind of like monster horror as a as opposed to like psychopath.
And that's something that people don't get, is this is not just like your typical horror movie. Like you were saying, this has everything with it. If you guys haven't seen American Werewolf in London, I strongly recommend you watch this movie. I would also strongly recommend you avoiding the sequel, American Werewolf in Paris. It's funny, a good friend of mine who's become a good friend of mine, Josh Shepard, he's the drummer from Coheed and Cambria. American Werewolf in London is his all-time favorite movie. Like, he's obsessed with this movie. It's fucking rad. And him and his buddy, because American Werewolf in Paris came out on Christmas, and they went Christmas morning to go watch American Werewolf in Paris because of how much they loved it. And he was telling me the story, and he's like, man, when we left the theater, his buddy was like, that movie ruined my fucking Christmas, man. It was the best story I've ever heard in my life. And it's funny because if you watch American Werewolf in Paris, it's like, look, I don't knock anything. If you're making art, good for you. You're making it for somebody, and I'm sure somebody enjoys it. But you take a movie that had so much heart and soul and practical effects, you turn that into CGI and unnecessary nudity and unnecessary adrenaline rushes. It just doesn't work. And that movie did not work for me either. But now, my friend, we talked about American Werewolf in London and how that movie affected you and what it means to you. But now, Michael, I'm going to go scream on you here for a second. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Wow. I don't know if it could be considered a horror film, but I feel like it's in there in a way. And I would have to say The Shining.
Oh God, yeah, man. I've got the key to room 217 hanging up on my wall all the time, man. Hell yes. If I got Jack Nicholson coming at me with an axe, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your fucking brains in, Oh my God. What an amazing fucking movie, man.
Yeah. Wendy? No, I think The Shining takes the cake for me as far as, they're like the Led Zeppelin of horror films.
Yeah, for sure. And you were saying, like, I don't know if this is horror. I'm one of those people that I'm not a horror snob. I can totally consider the first Ghostbusters movie to be a horror comedy, man. And people are like, no, it's a comedy. I'm like, dude, you watch that movie, and when she's sitting in the chair and the monsters are coming out of the chair and grabbing her, or even like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, or the jump scare with the librarian at the beginning. If you take the Saturday Night Live cast out of this movie with Aykroyd, Murphy, Ramis, you take them out of here and you put different actors in. This is just a straight horror movie. The reason it worked as a horror comedy is because the cast was so fucking brilliant.
Oh hell yeah, yeah.
I'll fight to the death that I've always considered Jurassic Park a horror movie. Like, you can't.
Well, yeah, well, because horror, I mean, I think it follows a structure.
Mhm.
It's just what the monster is, you know,
Yeah, dude,
in a
the part with
sense.
the Velociraptor in the kitchen is totally out of a slasher film. Like it's a
Oh,
complete slasher moment when it's
yeah.
claws are wrapping around the door. And if you're gonna
Oh
tell
my
me
God.
Jaws is a horror movie and Jurassic Park isn't, because I remember Fangoria caught a whole bunch of shit because they put Jurassic Park on the cover when it came out, and people were like, "This isn't a horror movie, Spielberg, blah blah blah." It's like the guy made Jaws, man, and you're not
Yeah.
ever arguing Jaws is a horror movie, but because this was a big box office hit, you're gonna argue that it's not a horror movie. Like these fucking dinosaurs running around killing people. That's fucking terrifying, man.
No, it has a lot of that same kind of like, you know, essentially like when a stranger calls, you know, like you
Yeah.
see, like when's it gonna show up? And once it
Mhm.
does, there's, you know, like Scream. Then it's, you know, you're battling it. But the suspense build in Jurassic Park is insane.
Yeah.
And then these things are you. Then they show like how vicious things. They don't give a rat's ass about anybody, and except just killing them, whatever's in front of them.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's. I mean, I remember being terrified
Mhm.
watching Jurassic Park in certain moments.
Oh, the T-Rex scene scared the shit out of me as a kid. My mom had to take me out of the theater so I could calm down a little bit when the
Yeah,
T-Rex was crushing the car and the kids were in it. I was like,
yeah,
what the fuck is this? Like, I'm freaked
yeah,
out, man.
yeah. No, but yeah. So yeah, and like, you know, The Shining, in a sense, is a slow kind of demise, and how he becomes the monster.
Yeah.
You know, but you kind of suspect it already, and even some of the opening scenes with the red rum, you know, is murder spelled backwards, and like
Mhm.
um and Danny, and just him, like he's got the touch or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
and he's and you know, he's like channeling it and anticipating. It's like and also you got Kubrick with all the shots, so immediately you're sucked in, and you're
Mhm.
like I remember being scared, and I didn't understand why, from the first scene of the film.
Yeah. Oh man, that overhead shot of the car,
Yeah,
brilliant, man.
yeah,
Brilliant. Like you said, the
yeah. Just how,
cinematography of The Shining is amazing. It's one of the best shot, like you said, one of the best shot movies. Like the part where they got the steady cam of Danny riding the tricycle around. Like
oh yeah,
you could put that scene on, like right now, you guys can see it playing over top of what we're saying. I
yeah,
hear it. I
yeah,
hear that
yeah,
tricycle
yeah,
going on the floor.
yeah. I hear it. Yeah, when you're talking about it, I hear it, and
Yeah.
like just the soundtrack is unreal, and just I mean, every frame of that movie is it's art. I mean,
Hmm.
it's thought out, and there's no accidents,
Hmm.
and everything has more meaning than what you're looking at.
Right. And it worked perfectly. I think Kubrick nailed that movie. And I'm glad you brought that up because, again, that's right here all the time because of how much that movie means to me.
Yeah,
Well, Michael, I got one more question for you before we go.
sure.
We're going to go back to American Werewolf in London. This is where we
Oh,
always end the podcast. We're going to be ranking this movie 0 to 5 skulls. Now, we're not being film critics. We're not ranking it on production or anything like that. We're ranking this movie strictly on what it means to you and how it
mhm.
affected you. So 0 to 5 skulls, you can use half and quarter skulls. What would your ranking of American Werewolf in London be?
I'm gonna give it 4 skulls.
It's a great ranking. Great ranking.
Yep.
So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it's
yeah,
one of those movies that, and it stands the test of time. Like we said earlier, there's still to this day, maybe Ginger Snaps, I guess, has a practical werewolf effect the way that this one did. And you watch it to this day and you're like, how the fuck did they make this look so great?
yeah, yeah. No, it does. And not. The only reason I wouldn't give it 5 is just because there's. I'll save that for like my The Shining would be a
Mhm.
5.
Right.
A sculler.
I could totally see that, man. Anybody that argues that, if you want to tell me that The Shining's not a 5 skull movie, I got some swampland to sell you because you'll believe anything.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I mean, I'm drifting on this one, but Poltergeist.
Dude. And it's funny because I just did a little bit of spoiler here for people that watch the podcast regularly. I'm in the middle of filming and editing my top 10 guilty pleasure horror movies that most people didn't enjoy. And Poltergeist 3 is on that list because I absolutely love the first Poltergeist. I think the first Poltergeist is amazing. Wasn't a huge fan of part 2, but I think part 3 is great. And it sucks because it's mired in tragedy. But the first Poltergeist, I think, really started something, because obviously the tragedy, and please don't think I'm lumping these things together, because the young lady from that movie lost her life because of a piece of shit boyfriend. Heather O'Rourke, the little girl, she lost her life because of a misdiagnosis medically. None of that has to do with curses of a film. I don't want to give the film any more power than it should. It didn't kill these young ladies. Unfortunate incidents did. But you always had that stigma around this movie because they used real skeletons in the swimming pool and on a burial ground. Like this movie, and it's funny too, man. Like Poltergeist is a funny movie, man. Like when they're talking and he's like, so what was the apparition you seen? And he's like, well, we put this car on the ground and it took about 6 hours, but it moved an inch and you'd never know. And he's like, oh, you're going to notice this. And they open the door and like the light bulb and the records are all flying around in circles. And the lady downstairs with her tea, like shaking and shit.
No, it was great. And it definitely tapped into just core childhood fears. Yeah. In a way, with the clown, with the tree. Just that's why I think it was so terrifying to me. It tapped into those, like, I think we're generically all scared of things, but certain things, like the fact that the tree breaks through the and grabs the kid, is like, oh my God, I was scared of that when I was a kid.
When I was a kid, and I'm sure much like me, whether it be at your house, your aunt's house, your grandma's house, your cousin's house, you had that one room that had a tree that always seemed like that would hit the window trying to sleep on a rainy night. And then you watch Poltergeist, you're like, that fucking tree's gonna get me, man. Like, I know that tree.
And eat me or whatever. Yes, like we're all somewhat, I guess, afraid of clowns, but the fact that it fought him.
And the way it does it, it's not just like it jumps out at him, it sits there and then turns the head and then it wraps the arm around slowly and drags him off. I still to this day, in my top 10 scariest moments in horror movies, when Heather O'Rourke just turns around and does the "they're here," that's fucking scary, dude. Like, I have 2 little girls, so I can tell you from experience, little girls are the scariest fucking thing in the world. Especially if they get, you got The Exorcist, you got Poltergeist. When you got little girls that are having tragic things happen to them, there's nothing scarier to me than that, man.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, man, I do appreciate you coming on. Everybody else, like I said, please make sure you're clicking the links down here in the description. I have all Michael's social media down there, so make sure you're giving him a follow. This dude means a whole lot to me as a kid. He means even more to me now, man. He's done so many things that I'm a huge fan of, and now this is probably my favorite thing he's ever done. So, Michael, don't go anywhere, man. I got a couple more questions for you off the record. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror. Stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.